Hello to all of you. Today we are going to learn chapter 7 of IED economics, and that is employment. Now, let me give you an outline. We are going to study what is the meaning of employment, worker and employment, participation in employment, self-employed and hired workers, formal and informal sector, the problems of unemployment, how to solve them, government and employment generation. So first, let's start with the introduction. Now, being employed in work gives us a sense of self-worth and enables us to relate ourselves meaningfully with others. And every working person is actively contributing to national income and hence the development of country by engaging in various economic activities. That is the real meaning of earning a living. So any person who's earning or any person who's working, they are contributing to the growth and development of the economy. So having recognized the importance of work, Mahatma Gandhi rightly said, and he insisted upon education and training through varieties of work, including craft. He was of the belief that if we want to grow, if we want our country to grow and develop, it is very important to develop the villages. That is, the rural development is necessary. So, studying about working people gives us insight into quality and nature of employment in a country and helps in understanding and planning our human resources. Now, let's talk about workers and employment. Those activities which contribute to GNP product are called economic activities. In short, when we differentiate economic activity and non-economic activity, all those people who are able to generate income or all those people who are involved into such activities which is helping them to generate income, they fall into the category of economic activity. And non-economic activity means there is no generation of income, which means you are not earning or getting anything in return in form of money. Like, let's say for example, if a if a lady who's working, be it a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor, then she is performing economic activity because she's earning and she's contributing. That income is part of GDP or GNP of the country. Now, when we talk about non-economic activity, a housewife who's working, who's taking care of the house chores, she is considered to be as a, falling under the category of non-economic activity because she is not getting anything in return in monetary forms. So those activities which contribute to the gross national product are called economic activities. All those who are engaged in economic activities, be it in whatever capacity, that is, it is high or low, they are the workers, including self-employed. So any person, whether that person is involved into any form of activity but is generating or contributing to GNP or GDP, then they are economic activities. Men form the majority of the workforce in India, and about 70% of the workers are men and the rest are women. So women workers account for 1/3 of rural workforce, whereas in urban areas, they are just 1/5 of the workforce. They are not paid wages in cash or in form of grains, and at times they are not paid at all. For this reason, these women are categorized as workers, are not categorized as workers because they are not paid. So let's talk about participation in employment. Worker population ratio is an indicator which is used for analyzing the employment situation in the country. Now, this ratio is useful in knowing the proportion of population that is actively contributing to the production of goods and services. So, if the ratio is higher, it means that engagement of people is higher or greater. And if the ratio for a country is medium or low, it means that very high proportion of its population is not involved into economic activity. So it is very much important that any country to develop should have more number of economic activities. People in rural areas, they have very limited resources to earn higher income because they do not have much of variety of employment opportunities like urban people. And urban people, they have variety of employment opportunities, unlike rural areas or unlike the people who are living in rural area. So the difference in the participation rate is very large in urban area. For every 100 urban females, only about 14 are engaged in some economic activity. Whereas in rural area, for every 100 rural women, about 18 participate in the employment market, which means that rural women, they are involved directly or indirectly into any of the work, be it economic or non-economic. So the participants of women, rural women, is more as compared to urban, because in urban areas usually men, they have wide varieties of employment option or opportunities of employment, due to which many of the women are not working. So it is common to find that where men are able to earn high incomes, families discourage female member from taking up jobs, especially in these areas, because they are earning enough to say that there is no need for the female members to take up any kind of job. And many household activities done by women are not recognized as productive work. So this is very narrow definition of work, because what about the woman who's taking care of house chores, but still that is considered as a non-economic activity. So this narrow definition of work leads to non-recognition of women's work, and therefore to underestimation of the number of women workers in the country, because there are n number of women who are working, at least I'm talking about the house chores, but still they are not considered to be a worker due to non-economic activity. Now, when we talk about participation in the employment, we can see and compare the ratio, that worker population ratio is more, of course, in case of men as compared to women. And when we talk compare about the women contribution of worker population ratio in rural and urban area, in rural area it is high, that is 17.5, and the worker population ratio of women in urban area is low as compared to the rural. So to conclude, we can say that, of course, women's ratio in the rural area in the worker participation is more. Then what about self-employed and hired workers? Workers who own and operate an enterprise. So when we say that workers who own and operate an enterprise to earn their livelihood are known as self-employed and accounts for more than 50% of the workforce. Like let's say the construction workers are known as casual wage labor, and they account for about 25% of India's workforce. So we can say that 50% fall under the category of self-employed, 25% are the casual laborers, and casual wage work is the second major source for both men and women, and little more so far for the latter. So when a worker is engaged by someone or an enterprise and is paid his or her wages on a regular basis, they are known as salaried people. So any worker who's involved or who's working in any of the enterprise or is being paid wages on the regular basis, they fall under the category of salaried employee. So men form 23%, whereas women form 21%. And the gap between men and women is less. Here, we have just tried to give you an overall picture of employment in firms, factories, and offices. We can say that primary sector, that is our agriculture. Secondary sector would include all the manufacturing industries, electricity, gas, water supply. And tertiary or service sector includes transport, storage, warehousing, banking, insurance. All these fall under the category of service sector. Now, talking about primary sector, we know very well that it is the main source of employment for majority of the workers in India. And secondary sector provides employment to about 24% of the workforce, which means that 31% of the workers are in service sector. So 60% of the workforce in rural area depends on agriculture and all the other allied activities like fishing, poultry, forestry. And about 20% of the rural workers are working in manufacturing industries and construction and other allied industrial activities. So we can say that service sector provides employment to about 20% of rural workers. And as I said, that 60% of the urban workers are in the service sector. Now let's talk about the growth and the changing structure. During the period of 1950s to 2010, the GDP of India grew positively and was higher than the employment growth. And during this period, employment grew at the rate of not more than 2%. And in 73, about 74% of the workforce was engaged in primary sector, which shows clearly that majority of the people were involved into agriculture and other allied activities. And in 2011 and 12, this proportion has declined to about 50%. Now, why there is a decline? Because there was growth in industrial and service sector. So the distribution of workforce in different status indicates that over the last 4 decades, people have moved from self-employed and regular salaried to casual wage workers. This ratio is alarming because in the last few decades there are many workers who have moved into the casual workers category. Yet self-employment continues to be the major employment provider. And that is why we say, and the government attracts that, there has to be more and more youth who's involved into self-employment. Because when you have self-employment, you are paving an opportunity for, opportunity for others to and hire them in your own company. We can see the growth and changing structure over here, that our GDP is higher than the employment growth. And let's talk about informalization of the workforce. Now, we classify workforce into two categories. We can say formal and informal sector, that is workers in the formal and informal sector, which are also referred to as organized and unorganized sectors. All the public sector's establishment and those private sector establishment which employ 10 hired workers or more are called formal sector establishment, and those who work in such establishment are formal sector workers. So any worker who's either employed into, be it public or private, and if that sector is employing more than 10 workers or more than 10 people, then they fall into the category of formal sectors. Now, when we talk about informal sectors, it includes millions of farmers, agricultural laborers, owner of small enterprise, and people who are working in those enterprise, as also the self-employed who do not have any hired workers. So though these people, they fall into the category of informal sector. Now, it would also include all the non-farm casual wage labor who work for more than one employer, like how we have construction workers. There are about 473 million workers in the country, and out of that, 30 million workers in the formal sector, and about only 6% are employed, and the rest 94% are in the informal sector. So we can see that majority of the population is working in the informal sector. Now, out of 30 million formal sector workers, only 6 million, now when we calculate, which means only about 21% are women. And in the informal sector, male workers account for 69%, which means that there is still a problem of gender equality where the woman is not allowed to educate or to work. So since the late 70s, many developing countries, including India, they have started paying attention to enterprise and workers in informal sector. Because as we saw that majority of the people are employed in informal sector. Now, when we don't invest, when we don't improve this sector, it is not possible for our country to grow and develop, not only in terms of productivity, but also in terms of infrastructure, in terms of output, in terms of GDP. Workers and enterprise in the informal sector do not get regular income. As I gave you the example that in informal sectors, we have farmers, we have small laborers, we have casual wage workers, self-employed. So they do not have any protection or regulation from the government, which is again very much important. And government has to take care of these informal sectors. Now, workers are dismissed without any compensation. And technology which is used in informal sector is also very outdated, or many of the people or many of the enterprises, they are using primitive technology, which is not giving them any good output or productivity. And they also do not maintain any kind of systematic accounts. So workers of this sector live in slum and squatters. We can see that most of the casual laborers, they live in slum and they are also in squatters. So of late, owing to the efforts of the International Labour Organization, that is the ILO, Indian government has initiated the modernization of informal sector enterprise. And they have also made a provision of social security measures to these informal sector workers. Now, when we talk about unemployment, and we very well know that NSSO defines unemployment as a situation in which all those people who have the ability, who wants to work, but they are not able to find any job, then they fall under the category of unemployment. So NSSO defines unemployment as a situation in which all those who owing to lack of work are not working, but either seek work through employment exchange intermediaries, friends, relatives, or by making application to prospective employer and express their willingness and availability to work. Now, economists say that unemployed person is the one who's not able to get employment or even 1 hour in a half day. And there are major three sources of data on unemployment. One, report of Census of India. Second, we have NSSO. And thirdly, Directorate General of Employment and Training data of registration with Employment Exchange. We have already learned in the earlier chapters as to what are employment exchange and what is the role of NSSO. So economists call unemployment prevailing in India firms as disguised unemployment. Now, what is disguised unemployment? Then let's say, for example, that in a farm, there is a requirement of 3 workers, but more than 3 workers are employed in the same farm to work. Let's say 6 are working on the same farm, whereas the requirement is only of 3. So those extra 3 are disguised unemployed. So when there is no work to do on farm, people go to urban areas and look for job. And this kind of unemployment is seasonal. As I gave you the example of disguised employment, that when people are employed more than what actually it is required, then it is disguised. Now, what is seasonal? In India, especially, we face this problem of seasonal unemployment because half of the population, or more than half of the population, is involved into agricultural activity, which is very much seasonal. So few months they have the work to do on the farms and crops and cultivation, but when there is no season for that particular crop, they have to wait for months, and that is seasonal unemployment. Now, due to this reason, there are people who go to urban areas and they look for so this is called seasonal unemployment. Scholar says that in India, people cannot remain completely unemployed for very long because, of course, because of their economic condition, it would not allow them. And in order to survive and in order to have survival of their family, they have to work somewhere or the other and take up even sometimes a dangerous jobs like working in risky or hazardous area. Now, National Rural Employment Guaranteed Act, that is 2005, promises 100 days of guaranteed wage employment to rural household, to all those people who wants to do unskilled manual work. And since independence, the union and state government have played important role in generating employment. And that is why we can see that government have various policies and schemes which attracts and which stimulates the rural people or small scale industries or cottage industries to have self employment and start a small business. And government also help all those people who wants to have a self employment with monetary loan. So government employs people into this various department for administrative purpose also, and it also runs industries, hotels, transport companies, so that employment can be generated to the casual workers. So indirectly, we can say that when output of this private company is of course increasing, and government is helping people to get the employment. There are many programs that government implements, and they are aimed at poverty elevation, and these programs are called employment generation programs. To conclude, we can say that there has been a change in the structure of workforce in India, because now people have started realizing the importance of education, that is literacy. They have started spreading the awareness about the health, hygiene, sanitation, to improve their standard of living. So there has been a change in the structure workforce of India, and there are varieties of allied activities which have given many opportunities to the people to move from agriculture to the different varieties of allied agricultural activities like fisheries, poultry, farming, etc. Now, the expansion of the service sector and advent of high technology now frequently permit highly competitive existence for efficient small scale and individual enterprise, or even specialist workers side by side with multinational. We can see that since few decades, even in India, the IT sector has been developing a lot, and we have also been doing outsourcing of work, and India has become a major hub of outsourcing. So the traditional nation of modern factory or office is no more, existing, because now we have people who are working from home, people who are working in multinational companies which are set in abroad, but we have people employed in India who works from India, or works from home. So the nature of employment has become more informal, with only limited availability of social security measures to workers. Thank you very much.